When the water disappears, secrets rise. Ghost towns, cars, skeletons, and ancient warnings etched in stone. You won't believe what surfaced. It began with the water pulling back quietly, steadily until the cracked lake bed started to whisper stories no one had heard in generations. In central Texas, the ghost town of Old Bluffton had been lost beneath the waters of Lake Buchanan for nearly a century. But during one of the region's worst droughts in recent years, the lake's levels dropped so low that pieces of the past started to push their way back to the surface. The town had been flooded in the 1930s when the Colorado River was dammed. Locals were forced to pack up their lives, and buildings were left behind to vanish under the rising water. Nobody thought they'd ever see it again. Yet as the lake retreated, something surreal happened. Dusty roads reappeared, stone foundations emerged, and walls still bearing soot marks from fireplaces stood like skeletons on a dry lake floor. You can now walk among the ruins, following pathways that once echoed with wagon wheels and church bells. A general store's broken tile floor lies half-sunken in dirt. Near the former town center, rusted tools and glass bottles poke from the soil, their surfaces dulled by time but strangely intact. Locals say you can find furniture handles still attached to collapsed doors and parts of old stoves lodged in the mud. It's like time pressed pause and then waited. People who lived nearby, some descended from families who once called Bluffton home, began visiting. Some came for nostalgia, others for curiosity. But the mood on site feels different, quiet, heavy, as if the earth itself remembers what happened here. And it's not just about ruins. There's something unsettling about the way it all sits. Buildings tilted slightly as if trying to rise again. Wooden beams that never rotted, bone-dry and sun-bleached, lie scattered where homes used to stand. A few spots even smell of charred earth when the wind shifts, likely from debris that caught fire when the lake first dried. Beneath the cracked mud of a drying riverbed in Texas, something incredible came to light: footprints from a world that existed long before humans. In the heart of Dinosaur Valley State Park, near Glen Rose, the drought pulled back the waters of the Biloxi River just far enough to reveal something prehistoric: giant three-toed impressions etched into stone, stretching out for dozens of feet. These weren't vague marks, or maybe this is a track kind of shapes. They were sharp, unmistakable, and ancient. The tracks belong to Acrocanthosaurus, a massive predator that once stalked this area over 100 million years ago. Think of it like a smaller Texas-built cousin of the T-Rex. Nearby, another set of smaller prints was revealed, likely from Sauroposeidon, a long-necked herbivore the size of a 5-story building. The scene felt almost like a prehistoric traffic jam frozen in time. What's eerie is how clearly you can follow the steps one after another, like the dinosaur had just walked through wet earth moments ago. You can even see where the claws dug in or slid slightly. Experts say it's one of the best preserved fossil trackways in the world, and it only shows up during extreme drought. Nature holds on to these secrets until it's forced to give them up. Walking through that dried out riverbed feels less like visiting a park, and more like stepping into a forgotten chapter of Earth's timeline. One where nothing human existed yet, and something enormous was just passing through. It's a reminder of what came long before us and what still waits quietly beneath our feet. In the hills of Catalonia, Spain, a haunting silhouette has become a recurring omen, a stone bell tower rising from a near-empty reservoir. That tower is all that remains of the village of Saint-Romain-de-Sceaux, a town deliberately flooded in the 1960s to make way for a dam. Most of the year, the church lies hidden beneath the waters of the Sceaux Reservoir, but when the drought hits, the entire structure rises like a cathedral of ghosts. Its walls are still intact, weathered, cracked, and moss-covered, yes, but unmistakably standing. The cross atop its steeple reflects sunlight like a mirror. Inside, you can see the old altar stones, the crumbled remnants of pews, and the rusted iron gates meant to keep out wild animals, now guarding only shadows. The surrounding lake bed reveals even more the outlines of streets, stone fences, and collapsed homes. Entire foundations resurface, their geometry still perfect despite decades underwater. Locals say that when the bell tower appears, it brings an eerie stillness to the valley. Birds go quiet, the air feels heavier. Once, the church bells rang out over a lively town. Now, when the water falls low enough to expose the tower, it feels like the building is ringing out a silent warning that not everything washed away with the flood. Visitors come to see it, but few stay long, as if something is watching. It's not every day you witness a ghost village rising from below. And unlike a movie set, this one doesn't feel staged. It feels like something sacred and strange is waking up. Something that was never meant to be seen again. As the Danube River withered under one of the worst droughts in recent memory, a forgotten graveyard of war emerged. Near the Serbian town of Prahovo, dozens of Nazi German warships rose from the depths, twisted metal hulls, shattered decks, and rusted turrets now visible above the waterline. These weren't ordinary boats. They were part of the Nazi Black Sea Fleet, deliberately sunk by retreating forces in 1944 to block Soviet access. For decades, they lay buried in silt and shadow. Then the river fell and the bones of that forgotten fleet surfaced. Some vessels still had ammunition on board. Explosives that hadn't seen daylight in 80 years sat in open air, corroded and unstable. Local authorities had to quickly cordon off the area. Divers said the interior of one ship still had bunk frames and storage lockers untouched since the war. Nature had sealed them off. The drought reopened them. The sight was surreal. Ships that once symbolized power and violence now looked like rusted coffins, their metal guts split open and filled with river mud. The way they leaned against each other, half submerged, half exposed, felt like a battlefield caught in freeze frame. A moment from the past dragged unwillingly into the present. It's not a museum display, it's real and it's decaying fast. Some locals believe the ships should stay where they are, as a warning. Others just want the river to rise again and cover what never should have returned. In northwestern Spain, near the Portuguese border, lies a ghost story made of stone. The village of Aceredo was drowned in 1992 to make way for the Lindoso Reservoir. Entire homes, roads, and shops vanished under the rising waters. But when an extreme drought hit the region, the lake retreated, and Aceredo returned. What makes this village so unnerving is how intact everything still is. You don't just see ruins, you see life, paused. Brick homes stand with window frames still in place. Cracked tile floors stretch out into open rooms. A rusted old car sits half buried in silt near a waterlogged sign reading, "Welcome to Aceredo." Some doorways still swing open. Plastic bottles, tools, and even shoes lay exactly where they were left more than 30 years ago. Walking through the muddy streets feels like trespassing in a world caught between timelines. Trees, long dead, stand like pale skeletons. The silence is thick, broken only by the squelch of footsteps and the occasional bird overhead. It's like time just stopped. Locals who once lived here have come back, some for the first time in decades. They've pointed out their old bedrooms, stores where they bought bread, fountains they drank from. It's emotional, sure, but it's also deeply unsettling. There's no color, no movement, no sound beyond nature trying to reclaim what once belonged to humans. Aceredo isn't a ruin. It's a memory that became physical again, walking out of the water like it never wanted to be forgotten. Lake Mead has always had an air of mystery, but lately, it's been giving up secrets that were never meant to be seen. As the reservoir's water levels plunged to historic lows, something chilling began to surface barrels. Not just any barrels, sealed, corroded, and heavy. When opened, the first one revealed a skeleton, still wearing 1970s-style clothing. Soon, more remains were found, bones scattered along the shrinking shoreline, even inside old boats stuck in the muck. Officials didn't name names, but local crime historians were quick to point fingers. This was classic organized crime territory in the Vegas era of fast money, flashing lights, and shady deals. And back then, Lake Mead was a convenient place to make problems disappear. But now, the lake has receded more than 150 feet. What was once 100 feet underwater is suddenly bone-dry beach. Hikers are stumbling onto sun-bleached shoes, rusted-out safes, and even an old handgun wrapped in plastic. All from decades ago, sealed away by rising water, and now laid bare by drought. One thing's certain, those barrels weren't meant to float back up. It's the kind of reveal that feels like something out of a Scorsese film. The setting sun over the cracked lakebed only adds to the feeling the past is back, and it's not quiet about it. When rivers shrink in the UK, history doesn't just reveal itself. It creeps out in the strangest ways. In several parts of England, especially in the Thames and Severn rivers, extreme drought exposed more than coins or clay pots. What emerged were witch bottles, bone charms, and ritual tools straight from folk traditions no one likes to talk about. These bottles weren't for drinking. They were filled with items like nails, teeth, hair, and pins, sealed and buried centuries ago to trap curses or ward off evil. Some were found under what used to be bridges or doorsteps. Others lodged deep in mud. Nearby, investigators uncovered animal bones arranged in patterns, small iron figures, and even carvings shaped like faces. Historians link these to anti-witchcraft rituals from the 1600s to 1800s, a time when fear ran deep and superstition ruled over logic. The bottles were meant to protect homes, often buried secretly and forgotten. But now the rivers have retreated, and they're reappearing, broken, exposed, and strangely intact. Local museums took in some of the items, but not all. Some collectors pocketed pieces only to later report nightmares and bizarre misfortunes. True or not, it's easy to understand how unsettling these finds are. They're not just artifacts, they're messages. Protective spells made by frightened hands, hidden for centuries, only to be dug up when the land goes thirsty. One archaeologist said it best, "The river is returning what people wanted to keep hidden, and it's doing it on its own schedule." Lake Poyang, often called China's Vanishing Lake, is known for its dramatic seasonal shifts. But during one of its most severe droughts, what emerged from its shrinking shoreline wasn't just exposed mudflats, it was human remains. Scattered bones began appearing near former village sites, buried for decades under silt and water. Many believe they belonged to people who were lost during past floods or evacuations in the 1950s and 60s, when massive infrastructure projects displaced thousands. Some communities were relocated almost overnight. In the rush, not all graves were moved. Others may have been victims of local skirmishes or historical conflicts hidden by time. When water dropped to record lows, partially collapsed grave markers surfaced. Pieces of cloth, faded wood fragments from coffins, and entire skulls were recovered in remote corners of the dried lake. Villagers nearby were stunned. Some said their grandparents had warned of entire cemeteries left behind when the water came in. Now the lake was giving them back. Officials worked quickly to identify and rebury what they could. But the scene with half-buried rib bones catching sunlight on a cracked lake bed stuck in people's minds. It wasn't just eerie. It felt personal, like the land was remembering those who had been forgotten. It was just another hot, dry day in Oklahoma when authorities made a discovery that would rewrite two missing persons cases from the 1970s. As water levels dropped at Lake Foss, a faint outline in the mud began to show. A car, half-buried and rust-covered, visible for the first time in decades. It was a Chevrolet Camaro, its body corroded but largely intact. When investigators approached and opened it, they found something chilling skeletal remains. Not one, but multiple sets of bones inside. Nearby, another car was discovered, an older Chevrolet also containing human remains. Forensic teams later identified the victims as two different groups of people who vanished over 40 years ago. Both cars had likely gone off the same road that now leads into the reservoir. Back then, there were no guardrails, and the edge of the water was deeper, darker, and more remote than it is today. The find sparked renewed interest in several other cold cases in the region. Locals began coming forward with old stories, strange disappearances, and theories that had floated around for years but never been proven. What once looked like unsolvable mysteries suddenly had answers, hidden just beneath the lake's surface all this time. The cars have since been removed, but even now when the lake runs low, people can't help but glance at the shoreline and wonder, what else might still be down there? It had been missing for decades, forgotten beneath the surface of one of California's largest reservoirs. But, when Lake Shasta dried up during one of its worst droughts, something really unexpected began to emerge, a long, rusted hull jutting out from the cracked shoreline. At first, locals thought it was just debris, but as more of it became visible, it was clear. This was no ordinary wreck. It was a World War II landing craft, completely intact and abandoned in the middle of a man-made lake. The craft, believed to be an LCM, landing craft mechanized, was probably used during training exercises or post-war transport before being left behind and swallowed by rising water. For 70 years, it remained hidden, sealed beneath the surface. That is, until the lake dropped to historic lows, exposing the boat like a war relic exhumed from the earth. Its steel frame was rusted but still recognizable, its flat-bottomed design made for storming beaches during amphibious assaults. The ramp at the front, where tanks or troops would have rolled out, hung partially open like a silent scream. A few markings were still visible, worn but legible, ghost letters from another era. Even the rivets and bolts looked ready to be unscrewed by time itself. Visitors who came across the craft were stunned. Some had lived nearby for decades and had no idea such a thing was even in the water. I mean, it's not every day you find a military artifact casually rising from a lake like something from a lost battlefield. What makes it even creepier is that it wasn't logged or documented anywhere official. No public records placed that boat at Lake Shasta. It had simply been left behind, just waiting to be noticed. The site is strangely peaceful now, but it lingers in your thoughts. A boat built for war, long out of place, quietly surfaced by nature's hand. Not a monument, not a museum piece, just a forgotten machine from a very different time, returned by the drought like a memory that refused to stay buried. In the heart of China's Yangtze River, a sacred secret rested beneath the water for centuries, until the river began to vanish. As drought gripped the region, water levels dropped to their lowest in decades. That's when stone figures started to appear on a rocky island reef near Chongqing. Carved into the cliff face, worn by water, but honestly, still remarkably detailed, were ancient Buddhist statues that hadn't been fully visible in living memory. The statues, believed to date back to the Ming and Qing dynasties, stood calm and serene even as the cracked riverbed revealed the scars of the dried-up waterway around them. The most striking was a seated figure resting on a lotus pedestal, flanked by smaller carvings, faded but still distinct. Scholars estimate they could be over 600 years old, created during a time when villagers carved their beliefs directly into the land. These statues were part of what locals call the Foiliang Reef. Most of the year they're underwater, only peeking through the current during the lowest tides. But now, with the drought pulling the Yangtze back further than anyone expected, the full site has emerged, revealing not just figures but inscriptions and patterns carved into the stone. Locals visit the site to offer incense, prayers, or simply stare. The atmosphere is oddly quiet, almost reverent. There's no formal temple here, no visitor center, just ancient faces staring into a dried river like they've been waiting for someone to notice. What makes this moment feel surreal is that these statues weren't discovered by digging or demolition. They were simply waiting below the surface, silent for centuries, until nature stepped back and let them be seen again. Some believe it's a sign, others see it as history reminding us it's still here. Either way, the river's retreat has revealed something sacred and hauntingly beautiful. In southern Mexico, where the Grijalva River feeds the Nezahualcoyotl Reservoir, something ancient occasionally stirs beneath the surface. Locals call it the Temple of Santiago, but honestly, most only know it from rumors or old family stories. Built by Dominican friars in the mid-1600s, this colonial church once served a thriving village. Then the water came. In the 1960s, the area was flooded for a hydroelectric dam, swallowing the church, its walls, and the entire surrounding settlement. For decades, the temple rested underwater. Most years, you'd barely see the top of the structure, but when drought hit hard, the river's level fell so low that the entire church emerged, standing like a sun-bleached skeleton in the middle of the reservoir. The building is massive, over 150 feet long, with soaring stone arches and a bell tower that still stands defiantly. The roof is long gone, but the bones of the church are intact. You can see where the altar used to be, where the pews would have lined up, and where echoes of voices once bounced off cold stone. What's eerie is how well it's preserved. The dry, still air around the ruins carries a strange weight. Fish bones crunch underfoot. Vines twist through empty windows. There's no roof, but somehow the energy of the place still feels enclosed, almost trapped in time. When the waters get especially low, boats can't reach the structure anymore. People walk out to it across dried lake bed, snapping photos next to crumbling walls. It looks like a film set from a forgotten post-apocalyptic story, except it's real, and it's been sleeping beneath the waves for over 50 years. Locals say the church comes back only when the river is truly in distress, and every time it does, it draws crowds. Not just for its architecture, but because of the unshakable feeling that something sacred was taken by the water, and every now and then refuses to stay down. Across rivers in Central Europe, as water levels drop, something disturbing begins to appear. Stones, old and weathered, carved with grim messages. These are the hunger stones, markers chiseled centuries ago into riverbeds during times of extreme drought. And when they become visible again, it's rarely a good sign. One of the most famous stones sits along the Elbe River in the Czech Republic. It reads, "If you see me, weep." That inscription dates back to the 1600s, when famine and crop failure swept through the region after a brutal drought. Other stones bear years etched into their sides, 1417, 1616, 1893, everyone linked to disaster. The stones weren't just warnings, they were records. Families who suffered during these lean years left behind inscriptions as a message for the future if the river drops this low again. Trouble is coming. Some stones are engraved with symbols of hardship, crosses, skulls, and cracked bowls, each one a haunting reminder of what low water once meant. Now, in recent years, as rivers like the Elbe and Rhine face record-breaking droughts, the hunger stones have reappeared. People photograph them, post them online, and speculate. But for those who know the history, their reappearance isn't just curious, it's unsettling. These stones weren't placed for art or culture. They were carved by desperate hands, during times when water disappeared and hunger took its place. The past is speaking again, and this time it's louder than ever. High in Italy's South Tyrol region, surrounded by snowy peaks and green slopes, lies a lake with a secret of 14th century bell tower rising straight out of the water. It's all that remains of Couronne, a village deliberately flooded in 1950 to create a reservoir. The rest of the town lies deep beneath Lake Resia, hidden from view, except when the water falls. During severe droughts, the church tower becomes more than just a strange landmark. The entire base of the structure is exposed. Stone pathways leading to submerged ruins become visible. Locals say when the water is low, the church seems to stand taller, like it's pushing its way back into the world. Even in normal seasons, the tower is surreal. It sticks out of the still blue surface like a monument from a dream. But when the drought tightens its grip, the atmosphere around it shifts. You can walk right up to it, run your fingers along the moss-covered stone, and hear the stories whispered by wind that weaves through the arches. Many visitors think it's just a quirky photo stop, but to residents, the tower is a reminder of a village that was sacrificed. Families were displaced, houses demolished, fields drowned. The town was real, and the tower is the last piece that refuses to sink. People claim to hear bells ringing from beneath the water, even though the actual bell was removed long ago. Whether it's a trick of the wind or something stranger, the effect is the same. You leave with goosebumps. Because Couronne didn't vanish, it's still there, just beneath the surface, watching. That's about it. So, what discovery scared you the most? Write in the comments. And for more useful information, check out the other videos.